Today I learned that 35 years ago, my parents mailed dozens of bologna sandwiches to various government officials and local celebrities. They called them the Baloney Sandwich Awards. What is something you found out later in life that made you realize your family is awesome? My dad paid his way through law school by being a smoke jumper. My mom paid her way through college by working in distribution for Playboy. My parents are badass. My mom worked in a convenience store in the early 70s. I think she was about 17 or 18. It started as a part-time job, but then the owners pretty much took off and my mom ended up picking up the slack working as a full-time manager. She had worked a 12-hour shift one day all alone when a guy came in with a gun and tried to rob the place. My mom was so tired and frustrated from working all day by herself and started screaming at the guy that he wasn't taking anything, and he took off running. As a kid during the Korean War, my dad and his friends would take notes during news radio programs and type up a junior war debt newsletter and put it in people's mailboxes to keep them in the know. A gov man showed up and told my grandma to make them remove war debt from their newsletter. The story of how my parents met. My mom's drunk bohemian mother skipped out on rent and left an apartment full of family heirlooms and furniture, like a table that's been in the family for 200 years. My mom wasn't having any of that, so she asked her friend Lou if he knew anyone with a big car and big balls. Lou calls my dad, who has a station wagon and sizable cojones, and the three of them break into the apartment, steal all of the stuff, and get away scot-free. Apparently mom liked dad pretty well, and we've been eating off a stolen antique dining room table ever since. TLDR. Dad met mom during a heist and they hit it off pretty good. Your mom stole the heirlooms and got the family jewels for free. Apparently you could write a letter to my grandfather labeled, the General, British Army, Egypt, and it would get to him. Apparently he was famous. I am not sure whether to believe my dad on this one. When my mother was a teenager, she wrote a weekly letter to the Chancellor advising him on economic policy, and he wrote back every time thanking her. So she carried on when he became Prime Minister. Only then it wasn't just economic policy. She started telling him what he should do on foreign policy and social policy too. I don't know if he ever took her advice. My dad is a soft-spoken, balding, slightly overweight, awkward computer geek with Buddy Holly glasses. I was totally shocked when I found out that he was the king of his high school. He was captain of the basketball team, no small featuring for a short Asian guy, valedictorian of his graduating class, did the cover art for his school's yearbook, and rode a motorcycle. He also rocked thick, luscious, shoulder-length hair until he graduated university. Okay, so this is cool, just not really good story cool. My family lives in a small community. The guy put in charge of the garbage dump did a bad job of it, and the state decided we couldn't handle our own garbage. They decided the town needed to ship their garbage 80 miles away. My mother, who wasn't part of any board, or even part of the local garbage, we live on a farm and have our own dump, started researching and making calls. She got a grant to purchase a recycling compactor. She then got the city to use a barn for a recycling center. People can bring in their recycling as well as the local businesses can now bale their own cardboard. She started a self-sustaining community program that has purchased replacement balers. The local garbage was cut to 1/3 and we are not required to haul our garbage. I would consider that a good story. It shows how someone with just a small idea and a little capital can help improve a community. You know, with the power of Reddit we could send a whole lot of bologna sandwiches to people deemed worthy. Just saying. If bologna is code for anthrax, I'm out. Dad went to University of Chicago. Around Thanksgiving every year, he and all his friends made an enormous maze of cardboard boxes in their dorm, went in, got stoned, and tried to find their way out with the lights off, crawling on all fours. The only really cool thing I know my dad and his buddies did, when the Pope came to Philadelphia when they were in college, they all dressed up in suits and put on Walkman earphones and pretended to be the Pope's bodyguards. May have been Secret Service. Apparently Secret Service was freaking out not knowing who these other agents were. I'd imagine that wouldn't go over too well these days. My dad is a lawyer in the army, an organization known for its sense of humor and lax attitudes towards hierarchy. On at least 2 or 3 occasions when a boss of his would make a boneheaded decision, he would present them with the Loose Cannon Award. He would purchase a pewter cannon figurine, go to the local print shop, and get a classy certificate printed up and framed. I believe on the certificate it said Loose Cannon, and in smaller letters below it said Ready, Fire, Aim. The highest ranked person to get one of these was a base commander, and probably a 1 or 2 star general. My father is a wanted criminal in his home country of Iran. He actually has a bounty on his head and faces the death penalty if he ever goes back. The reasoning? When the revolution took place in 1979 and the introduction of the Islamic Republic, my father was a clerk in the military. My father forged hundreds of documents excusing soldiers who were either Jewish or Christian from reporting for duty and allowing them a short leave of absence from the military to leave the country where none of them returned. My father was discovered and jailed and was only able to escape because one of the people working was a Muslim but whose nephew was Christian and was allowed to leave thanks to my father. My father will never talk about it. I only found out about this story from my uncle when in Temple a man bumped into my father and started crying at my father's feet. To which my uncle told me the story and how he crawled through a sewers filled with crap and nearly died in Syria when his car broke down and he drank the water from the radiator to avoid dehydration. TLDR. My daddy is a BAMF. Whoa, your dad is the kind of hero they make movies about. That's amazing. My dad was a state senator back in the 80s and voted in favor of gay rights and marijuana legalization. I didn't hear about either of those until after I came out to him about 8 years ago, and to be honest, I had been really nervous about coming out to him. He never seemed all that comfortable around the idea of homosexuality when I was growing up. Go, Dad. When my uncle was in 1st grade he was getting picked on by a much older kid. I believe my grandma went to the school about it, but they didn't do anything, so my uncle took matters into his own hands. He beat the crap out of the 5th grader with his metal lunchbox. From that point on, he only got the plastic ones. When he was older he would also pedal his bike down the biggest hill in town to go as fast as he possibly could. The sheriff had to stop by and ask my grandma to make him stop because he was scaring all the drivers. There is also a story about my dad, a homemade bomb, and a dumpster I think, but no one will tell me that story. I misread that and imagined the kid's uncle beating a young kid with a metal lunchbox. Dad, what are you watching? Me. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Dad, what the frick are these 2 guys doing? Me. They're high on mescaline. Dad. Dad considers this for a moment with a thoughtful expression, then shrugs and says, I never acted like that when I was on mescaline. Turns, walks out of room while I stare after him with a shocked expression. There's a very small portion of a Venn diagram where people who have done mescaline and people who haven't heard of Hunter S. Thompson exist. Most of our family's friends know we're some sort of religious, but have no idea what or how. My parents love taking advantage of this. Whenever one of us kids has a guest over for dinner for their first time, Dad says, and now we say grace. We have all been trained to then stand up and raise our hands in the air, start hollering, and sometimes dance. Mom and Dad make sure to make a big show of it. We do this until the guest is confused enough to try to join in. We then all stop and stare at him like he's a freak. Sometimes we let the guest know we were joking. Sometimes not. This tradition was started by my dad on a whim, right after we moved here. Can't really top that, but going back another generation, my great uncle was, I think, director of engineering at de Havilland. Turns out he worked on the first passenger jet plane. Thought that was pretty cool. My dad was a highway patrolman in Kansas. A few days after the OKC bombing he had to drive through a little town to pick up a friend of his to go to a meeting in Topeka. After going back through the town again his friend forgot something, so they went back to his house, then headed back towards Topeka. Terry Nichols, a man who plotted and helped supply for the attack, was living in that town. He turned himself in later that day due to being so paranoid about the heavy police presence in the town. My dad was the only patrol car to go through the town that day, so it's entirely possible that my dad pushed Nichols to turn himself in, without even trying. It's hot in Topeka. Not my whole family, but my father. My father became the treasurer of his fraternity in college, but when he first got to work, he realized that the last treasurer, who had recently moved a few states away, had not been paying any of their bills for the past few months and had depleted all of the frat's savings. They spent a while trying to track him down, but they couldn't find him. It was the 70s and he didn't leave a phone number, so they had to find a way to get money quickly. My dad had the idea to buy an old Coke machine and to fill it with beer. They then threw some big parties and told everyone they could buy beer at the party. They spent the next few weeks keeping it stocked and throwing parties. For the next 2 years my dad was in the frat. They didn't have to pay dues. The beer machine paid for everything. About 10 years later, my dad got a letter from his old fraternity saying that they had been asking around and they were told he had created the idea of the magic beer machine, and they felt they needed to tell him that the school had finally found out no one had paid dues in 10 years. TLDR, my dad created a magic beer machine while in college. When my mum and auntie were teenagers, they used to tell my Catholic grandma that they enjoyed the latest church service so much they were going to go to another service in a neighboring suburb, but they actually just smoked joints on the beach together. They would even plan ahead so they could tell my grandma which passage was read out and which father was speaking on that day. Haha. In HS, my friends and I referred to smoking weed as Bible study. My dad had cancer, had to drop out of college, survived after 2 years of chemotherapy with 10% survival odds. Then he had cancer again shortly after I was born. Again he survived and I was named after the doctor who saved his life both times. I love a good how I got my name story. Every year in my town there's a huge art fair for a couple weeks in the summer, where artists come from around the country to peddle their wares. People sell everything: huge paintings, tapestries, jewelry, carved wooden bowls, beautiful photographs, weird clothing, creepily lifelike statues of people with hair and all. If it's called art, you can buy it there. Apparently, when my twin sister and I were infants, my parents walked around the whole fair one summer with a sign on our stroller saying "for sale, price on request." Peddle, not pedal. Well, I feel lame next to some of these people. My mom isn't the ones who changed a lot, but did one really awesome high school prank in the day. The school had a double set of entry doors. Go through one door, small space, then another. She sealed them off with caulking glue and ran a hose through the vents to fill it with water. She then bought fish from a local pet store and put them in aquatic entry doors. My dad was an NHL hockey player in the 1950s who had a contract that allowed him to continue to attend university engineering by playing home games only. I've mentioned it before, but my parents were hippies back in the 60s. I have some vague memories, but my mother is quite a storyteller. Recently a Woodstock photo book was published, and I opened it up at the store to find a 2-page photo of the stage showing her, my father and my uncle, mother's brother, all holding cables near the stage during setup. Was very nice to see some independent verification. A while back I learned that my dad and his friends ran a fake, satirical candidate for the mayor of their city. At the time there was a large anti-francophone sentiment. This is Canada, so they ran an imagined candidate called Bill and Jill to mock the various hateful people. In a city with a population of about 500,000, they received around 10,000 votes. That's awesome. As someone who crosses the river from French into English territory and back every day, I appreciate the gag and the message behind it. I probably would have voted for that guy. My great uncle was one of those millionaire next door types. Built his own house. Why buy a button when we have safety pins? Duct tape a radio to the dashboard rather than pay for the radio option on a car. That type. He lived through the Depression, so didn't trust banks and instead buried a substantial portion of his wealth in coffee cans around his property. When he died there was a family treasure hunt to dig it all up. I think I read this on another Reddit post. Was that you who dug up the cans in the middle of the night? I need to leave Reddit. My grandfather helped Charles Lindbergh chart out his first solo flight. Lindbergh gave my grandfather a dog as a thank you gift. Pretty cool. A close relative of mine was one of the people in charge of building the Spirit of St. Louis for Lindy, the small world of Reddit. My mum founded and ran a smallish group during art school. The name? the ukulele club. But here's the kicker. Out of the 230 people, not a single one of them knew how to play a ukulele, let alone owning one. My mum has the binder some random place and shows me from time to time. It's just full of pictures of them chilling and having fun. It's late right now, but if enough interest is shown, I may look for it in the morning. I can't find an article online about it, since it was in the mid-80s, 1985 or 1986 I want to say, but my dad's sister Donnie and dad's cousin Tim are pretty famous in my hometown's high school for these two. 1. It was almost senior prom, and Donnie and Tim decided that they'd play a senior prank. They, along with the help of a friend who worked in the school offices, acquired a ream of paper with the school's letterhead on it. They typed up a letter stating that condoms would be distributed at prom and sent it to the parents of all of the juniors and seniors at the high school. Back when everyone was given one of those school address books with everyone's address and phone number in it. The school was flooded with phone calls from outraged parents, and Donnie and Tim were interviewed by tons of local media outlets about the prank. 2. Last day of senior year, Tim brought a bunch of fireworks to school and lit them off in front of his favorite teacher's classroom. Somehow never got caught, still walked at graduation, etc. I asked my mum when I was about 13 if she had ever been arrested. She said she got arrested for public nudity when her friends and her went swimming in a fountain when they were stoned. I'm 25 now. Sounds like something my friends and I would do. I found a small album of pictures a few years back of my parents protesting outside, if I remember correctly, the Iraqi embassy in London. They were protesting against Saddam and the British support he was getting. My dad, who is in his 60s and has a PhD in chemistry, is currently a university lecturer. I think the pictures were taken in the 70s as he is sporting flares. I've not got a particularly good relationship with him, but I've secretly admired him a little since I saw the pictures. My mum is a retired nurse who is now in her 50s, and she took one of my older sisters in a pram with her to the protests, which has made me respect her just that little bit more. I'll try to find the pics, scan them and post them soon. My mom, as a kid, always told me that my uncle died in a car accident. Later on, around 16 or so, she told me that he actually died from being lynched by the local police force for sticking up constantly for a black guy. The same uncle also held his chemistry professor out a second-story window by the collar to get him to apologize for making fun of a freshman. My uncle was a junior. Not sure if that makes my family awesome, but it always made me feel like the guy was badass despite never meeting him personally. My great-grandfather was a mailman in Chicago. Now, back in the day this was where the biggest celebrities in the country lived, and my great-grandfather happened to deliver to their neighborhood. It turns out he dated a few of them, including Kim Novak, and apparently kept nudes of her in his wallet. Very odd, but I might be able to top that one. My parents had a good friend who ran a local dance studio. She loved to decorate for any occasion, and one year she managed to get a hold of, not one but two of those 4.5-foot Santas that dance when you come near them. One was a white Santa and one was a black Santa. Needless to say, both scared little kids when they started to dance every time someone walked up. My parents abducted the black Santa in the middle of night and dressed it up with a Hawaiian shirt and lots of empty margarita mix buckets. They then snuck it over to the dance teacher's house and left it on their back porch facing in through their window. After freaking out, the couple thought it was so hilarious they put it on another neighbor's porch that night. Every year it comes out to play from Thanksgiving to New Year's and can be found on any porch in our neighborhood's houses. Costumes have gotten even more elaborate each year. Also, my dad fondly calls it Obama Claus. We support Obama. We support Obama. Equals it's okay. I have a black friend. My father used to run a 24-hour photo shop back in the 80s and 90s. The name of the store was Flashers and their slogan was, "Get your best exposures at Flashers." It's weird to realize your parents were funny at one point. I have a great one about box store revenge. Just so you all know, my uncle owned 15 houses in his neighborhood, operated a transmission repair shop, and built ultralight aircrafts in his spare time. A local Canadian Tire in Calgary, Alberta screwed up big time when they stopped my uncle outside of their store. They thought he had stolen something. When he left without paying for anything, they searched him and found nothing. My uncle was so embarrassed by the search, and the fact they never even apologized to him. Rather than get mad, he got even. This journey took him over a 4-year period to achieve. What he did was simple and enjoyable for him. He would buy everything he could from them as long as it came in a package or box. Then the next day go back into the store and leave the empty package or box somewhere in the store. He watched that store go from having shelves that stretched way up high to having shelves anyone could see over. For security reasons, the store hired full-time security inside and outside. They set up cameras down every aisle. They had people to monitor the cameras at all hours. They even told my uncle what they were doing when he inquired about all the changes that had happened. We had to increase security. Due to a massive number of thefts from the store, my uncle said the hardest part was to return bigger boxes without being found out, which he had folded and then opened them to original size once in the store. Lots of times he just left packaging in the washrooms. No cameras. But the best he said was when he got brazen and just walked a fridge box in and placed it right down in an aisle. Then bought a dishwasher the same day and returned the box right after taking it off in the parking lot. The Canadian Tire got so paranoid that they reduced the number of hours they were open, so they could have more staff on hand to watch the store. They spent so much that the store became unprofitable even though they never lost any money or merchandise. Due to expenses in security and remodeling the store numerous times, they eventually had to close the store. My uncle got his revenge on them. My birth certificate says human for race of mother and race of father. My dad did that back in the days when they were filled out on typewriters. The clerk asked him if he was sure about 5 times, apparently, and he stuck to his guns. Unfortunately, by the time he died, everything was computerized, so I couldn't return the favor on his death certificate. My dad gave a knitted sweater for your nutsack to his dad for Christmas one year. My aunt got married to a new guy named Tim. Both of them are over the age of 60. On Christmas Day, their first Christmas together since getting married, there was a gift under the tree that said to Susan, my aunt, from Tim. The present was a book called Sex After 60. It was around 200 pages long. Every single page in the book was blank. My dad had bought the book, wrapped it, and put to Susan from Tim. Tim wasn't there on Christmas Day, so he couldn't say that he didn't wrap it or anything like that. Laughter ensued when the present was opened. Whoa, I don't really think anyone can top your story. I only have a small one. A few years back I found out that my dad, who is a respectable, educated, well-spoken gentleman and likes golf and wine, used to have a gigantic Jufro and went skinny dipping with his mates in Oxford. It gave me a completely different perspective on him. Dude, that is just like my dad. Now he is very respected in his field, but I found out recently he was a party animal years ago when he met my mom. My mom grew up extremely poor outside of Los Angeles, raised by a single mom who had her when she was a teenager. She, my grandma, always told my mom that her dad, my grandpa, was a rebel, a criminal, and was probably wasting away in prison. At the time he smoked and rode a motorcycle, which during the late 50s was apparently considered criminal activity. After my grandma died, my mom enlisted the help of a genealogist to help her find her dad, to at least get some closure. She found the dude in 3 hours of searching, and was shocked when she found out who he really was. He lived about 200 miles away in the same state, CA, but when she was growing up he lived in Anaheim, working as an artist for Disneyland. The guy has drawn his entire life, and is one of the genuinely coolest guys I've ever met. He worked as animator at first, and then went on to paint parts of the park and whatnot, for 20 years. Take James Dean. Make him an incredible artist, make him grow up as a cowboy, and then give him the title of chess master, and you've got my grandfather. Then there's my cousin, who's a former Navy SEAL, now crab fishing in Alaska, and my mom's uncle who could be a goddamn movie star, but instead decided to fight forest fires. My family is full of badasses. And you on Reddit. Even though my father was 100% Dutch, he grew up for most of his childhood teenage life in Mexico. Finally, he came to the US for his college education. As he applied for a dorm room, he came across a question asking about his race. Growing up in Mexico, he didn't really care and put down African American for shoots and giggles. And that is how my dad ended up as the only white guy in the black side of the dorms. His roommates were suspicious until my dad explained. Then, they all had a good laugh and bought some beer. My grandpa, Jerry, was a total badass and genuine prankster his whole life. My grandpa's best friend Axel was a similar type of character and had been in an accident as a child and had 2 wooden legs for the majority of his life. The two of them would conspire and come up with the funniest pranks that were all from innocent to deranged. Among these pranks, 1. Staging a bar fight in my grandpa's bar that escalated to Axel having his wooden legs sawed off with a chainsaw. 2. Replacing my newborn aunt with a legless, bearded, drunk Axel. They topped it off with a bonnet in the bassinet that was then rolled out in front of a dozen older women who were expecting to see a baby girl. Scared the crap out of them. 3. Arranging a beach parasailing accident that involved Axel's legs being torn off. They were quite the team. I love hearing those stories. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.